Hey guys, tonight we gather around a story so quiet, so gentle, and so warm, it might just lull you to sleep before we even get to the family drama, which, trust me, in Greek mythology, is saying something. Picture a stone hearth flickering softly in the center of a darkened room. Shadows dance on the walls. The crackle of firewood is the only soundtrack. You're seated on a cushion. The smell of warm bread and old olive oil hanging lazily in the air. There's no battle here, no epic quest, no cursed weapons or gorgons. Just one goddess, sitting with her hands folded calmly in her lap. Not a bead of sweat on her divine brow. Her name is Hestia, and she doesn't care about being in your epic poem. She just wants to make sure your soup doesn't boil over. Of course, you probably won't survive this myth. Not because there's any danger, but because it's so gentle, so uneventful, and so painfully cozy. You're going to pass out halfway through your own sentence. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, because I bet it's bedtime somewhere. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step into the myth not with a clang of swords, but the creak of a door and the hush of warm air meeting your face. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, of home, of stillness, sits in the first seat of Olympus, but you'd never notice her unless she stood up. Which, to be clear, she never does. Unlike her siblings, storm-hurling Zeus, sea-shaking Poseidon, underworld gatekeeping Hades, Hestia does not throw tantrums or hold grudges. She doesn't fly off on chariots or transform lovers into shrubs. Her superpower? Not moving, not meddling, just being there, warm and stable and kind of smug about it. To be honest, she's the first child of Cronus and Rhea, which means she gets eaten first. Yes, in classic Greek parenting fashion, Cronus swallows all his kids whole like a deranged competitive eater trying to dodge a prophecy. But when Zeus later stages a vomit-fueled jailbreak, Hestia is the first to be reborn. First in, first out. It's a bit like being the first pancake, a little overlooked. Maybe a bit quiet, but still vital to the stack. Historians still argue whether Hestia was considered technically a major Olympian throughout the classical period. Some say she gave up her seat for Dionysus, god of parties and poor decisions. Others insist she was always on the roster, just not into meetings. In truth, she doesn't need a throne to wield her power. She is the hearth. She's every flame in every home, temple, and city hall. That's more reach than a thunderbolt any day. You sit beside her and feel the stillness. There's a calm here that no other god bothers with. Athena's sharpening a spear in the corner. Hermes is halfway to Egypt with someone else's sandals. Ares is flexing at his own reflection. But Hestia? She hands you a cup of hot honeyed wine and pats the cushion beside her. There's something oddly modern about her. She doesn't need the spotlight. She's the introvert in a family of narcissists. The friend who brings soup when you're sick and leaves before things get awkward. The one who never shows up on Instagram, but always knows where the band-aids are. A fringe legend, unverified but delightfully weird, claims that Hestia once tried to go on a journey. Just once, just to see what it was like. She made it to the edge of Mount Olympus, tripped over a goat, and went straight back to her fire, declaring, "Never again." No one's been able to prove it happened, but it feels true. You look at the hearth again. There's no crown, no battle scars, no chaos, just warmth, and in a world of angry gods with impressive weaponry. Maybe that's the most radical thing of all. You glance again at Hestia. The way her fingers curled gently around the lip of a clay bowl. Her eyes half-lidded in the firelight. You'd think being born into absolute chaos might leave some lingering trauma. But she seems untouched. Maybe it's because she was too young to remember being swallowed whole. Or maybe, more likely, Hestia just doesn't do drama. Her birth, like all the Olympians, is less fairy tale and more family nightmare. Cronus, paranoid and prophecy-haunted, is told one of his kids will overthrow him. Classic mistake. Instead of, say, therapy, he goes with the time-honored method of newborn ingestion. One by one, they disappear down his gullet like divine tic-tacs. Hestia goes first. She doesn't scream, doesn't thrash, just goes. And that sets the tone. Later, when Zeus tricks Cronus into puking everyone up, An image you should probably not visualize before bed. Hestia reemerges. Dignified, serene, possibly smelling faintly of stomach acid. But let's not dwell on it. She's reborn into a world of revolution, titans crashing, heavens shaking, gods shouting across war-split skies. And she blinks, rubs her eyes, and finds the nearest unoccupied corner with a decent view of the fire. Historians still debate how active Hestia was in the Titanomachy, the 10-year celestial turf war that birthed the Olympian reign. Some argue she fought bravely in Zeus's army. Others say she sat it out entirely, stirring soup and humming lullabies while the sky collapsed outside. No one knows for sure. But given her track record of dramatic avoidance, you can probably guess where the smart drachmas land. You picture her as a child, watching her siblings practice lightning, wave quaking, and monster taming. Meanwhile, Hestia carves spoons out of laurel wood and hums to the chickens. It's not laziness. It's knowing her lane. While everyone else dreams of power, Hestia dreams of peace. Not just quiet, but harmony. The kind of feeling you get when your socks are warm and there's stew on the stove. And that desire, so unflashy it's almost invisible, sets her apart. In the squabble for cosmic real estate, the Olympians divide up the world like overconfident landlords. Zeus claims the sky. Poseidon calls dibs on the sea. Hades gets the underworld, somewhat by accident. But we'll get there. Hestia? She eyes the hearth, the literal fire at the center of it all. The domestic, unglamorous, absolutely essential flame that turns houses into homes and temples into sanctuaries. Here's a quirky bit. In some Orphic traditions, the hearth isn't just a cozy household feature, it's the actual center of the cosmos. A kind of metaphysical glue that binds heaven and earth. And at the middle of that gluey, glowing spot? Hestia. Not bad for someone who didn't even bother to pick up a weapon. The other gods, of course. Posture. They throw parties. They start wars. Even Athena, goddess of wisdom, gets a little stabby when the mood strikes. But Hestia just keeps the fire going. There's a phrase whispered in sleepy towns across the Greek world: as long as the hearth burns, the family endures. She doesn't just represent stability, she is stability. She's the firstborn, which in mythological terms doesn't usually mean much, unless you're trying to start a drama. But in Hestia's case, it matters. It's her fire that's lit first in every sacrifice. She gets the first portion of offerings before any other god. Even Zeus. The priests might be pouring honeyed wine to Hera or Ares or Hermes. But they start with Hestia. Always. And she never brags. Not once. There's something infuriatingly peaceful about her. Like that one friend who never checks their phone, drinks room temperature tea, and goes to bed at 9:15 on purpose. You kind of want to shake her and ask, "How are you not bored?" But she just smiles, shrugs, and offers you a hand-knit blanket. A more fringe myth, again. No guarantees on accuracy, suggests that Hestia once tried to attend a godly council and fell asleep halfway through the first agenda item. Zeus was reportedly not mad, just disappointed, and Hermes doodled a fire pit on the scroll beside her name. You lean against the wall now, drowsy with warmth, the fire painting lazy shadows on the stone floor. Hestia doesn't need a sword or a scandal to stay relevant. She just needs you to remember that someone, somewhere, has to keep the light on. The thrones of Olympus are lined up like VIP seats at a celestial awards show. Gleaming gold, carved with symbols, hovering slightly above the marble. You can picture Hermes doing a cartwheel into his seat. Athena arriving early with a clipboard. Poseidon muttering something salty as he brings seawater footprints across the divine rug. Zeus, naturally, is in the middle, throwing dramatic glances around like he's waiting for applause. And then there's Hestia. She walks up quietly, looks at her assigned seat, beautiful, polished, everything one could want in a place of honor, and then steps aside. No tantrum, no grand speech, she just gives it up. Historians still argue whether this was a permanent handoff or a temporary exchange. Some sources say she ceded her throne entirely to make room for Dionysus, god of wine, theater, and regrettable tattoos. Others think she simply opted out of public seating in favor of kitchen shadows and temple embers. Either way, it's official. Hestia is offered a throne and says, "No thanks, I'll stand." It's almost comical. Imagine turning down a seat at the literal top of the universe because you prefer floor cushions and casseroles. But that's Hestia logic. Everyone else is angling for more worshippers, more temples, more visibility. Hestia? She wants fewer meetings. You watch as Dionysus strolls up, all swagger and grapevine accessories, and slips into the empty chair. There's a moment where he seems confused, like he expected some kind of struggle. But Hestia just smiles and walks away. No power plays, no barbed comments, just one goddess making herself useful elsewhere. It's not that she doesn't matter. Quite the opposite. In ancient Greek households, the hearth fire was never allowed to go out. It was considered an omen of doom if it did. Families arranged marriages, settled disputes, and swore oaths beside it. And that fire? Always dedicated to Hestia. Even city-states treated her flame with awe. When founding a new colony, settlers would carry embers from the mother city's hearth to light the new one, like a sacred USB stick of divine domesticity. No Hestia fire, no legitimacy. That's how deep her roots ran. She was literally the spark that made a place official. And she didn't need a throne to keep that going. You picture her now, walking barefoot across Olympus, ignoring the bickering of gods as she checks on the kitchen. The sacred flame, maybe fluffs a pillow or two. No one asks her to do it. She just does. And Olympus doesn't fall apart because of Ares' anger or Apollo's pride. It stays standing because Hestia made sure the pilot light stayed on. A lesser-known tradition says that if a guest entered your home, you offered them a place by the hearth before anything else. Not food, not drink, not even a name, just warmth. In a world of constant travel and shifting alliances, this act of hospitality was sacred. Hestia wasn't just the goddess of the hearth, she was the welcome. Of course, there were those who found her boring. The ancient poets barely wrote about her. There are more lines in Homer about Achilles' toenails than about Hestia's divine fire. But maybe that's the point. She wasn't built for spectacle. She was built for steadiness. A quirky theory tossed around by fringe scholars suggests that Hestia might have been an earlier, pre-Olympian figure absorbed into later Greek mythology, perhaps even a personification of an older, matriarchal hearth cult. The theory isn't widely accepted, but it's a cozy thought, that Hestia predates the shouting matches and lightning bolts and just quietly kept the soup simmering while the world evolved. You sit there, listening to the soft pop of firewood. Around you, the thrones gleam in their gaudy, oversized glory, but there's a reason the camera never pans back to show Hestia in those flashy scenes. She's behind it, of course, stirring, warming, watching, never once needing applause. You barely notice it at first, the subtle tension in the room. The low hum of anticipation that always precedes a Greek mythic proposal. Across the polished floor of Olympus, two gods, Apollo and Poseidon, approach with an air of confidence that only comes from having never been rejected. They both want Hestia. Yes, that Hestia, the one currently kneading dough or lighting incense. Absolutely not paying attention to this courtship spectacle. She doesn't even look up. You can already tell this isn't going to end with wedding bells. Let's start with Apollo, sun god, golden boy, lyre virtuoso, inventor of unnecessary glowing entrances. He likely opens with a poem. Something about fire and purity. Maybe a metaphor so forced it makes Hermes choke on his ambrosia. He's trying. He really is. He's sincere. In that polished, performative way some golden gods are. Then comes Poseidon, rolling in like a salty bachelor with a trident and a ship full of ego. He promises oceans, pearls, horses, because nothing says romantic stability like aquatic chaos. His idea of courtship probably involves splashing a coral reef and expecting applause. But Hestia? She smiles politely. And declines. Twice. She doesn't do it cruelly. There's no dramatic rejection, no screaming match, no curse, just a quiet shake of the head. Maybe a hand resting gently on the hearth beside her. Her fire doesn't even flicker. It just keeps burning, as if to say, I already have everything I need. You'd think this would wound divine pride. But somehow, it doesn't. Even Apollo and Poseidon, gods with egos the size of Crete, seem to accept her answer with grace. Because Hestia's refusal isn't about them. It's about her oath. According to the Homeric hymn to Aphrodite, yes, even Aphrodite gets involved in this lore. Hestia swore a vow of eternal virginity. Not out of prudery, Not out of fear, simply because she preferred it. She promised Zeus that she would remain independent, untouched, and utterly focused on her sacred duty. And Zeus, to his credit, honored it. He granted her the place of honor in every household, made her the first recipient of offerings at every sacrifice, and gave her what she wanted most, peace. Historians still discuss whether this vow made her more revered or simply less written about. In a pantheon full of seduction, betrayal, and extremely complicated family trees, Hestia stands alone, untouched, unscandalized, and perfectly content. You imagine a conversation, late at night, between her and Artemis, another famously independent goddess. Maybe they share a cup of spiced wine, trade tips on politely avoiding Olympian parties, and bond over the joy of sleeping alone without someone turning into a swan beside you. There's a lesser-known myth, again, whispered more than written, of a mortal king who once tried to dedicate a temple to Hestia without actually building a hearth. He figured a statue would suffice. The temple, according to legend, burned down within the week. No hearth, no Hestia. Message received. Her sacred flame isn't symbolic. It's literal. You don't worship Hestia with fanfare. You do it by lighting a fire, by feeding it gently, by sitting beside it in silence. And perhaps that's why her refusals, romantic or otherwise, land so gently. She doesn't push people away. She just stays still. The suitors leave eventually. Apollo goes back to singing badly at Muses. Poseidon drowns a coastal village or two to get over it. Life moves on, but Hestia remains. At the center. Always. There's a phrase you hear often in ancient Greek rituals. Without Hestia, nothing begins. No meal, no offering, no marriage. Even the gods, with all their swagger, must pass by her fire first. And she doesn't ask for anything in return. No tributes of gold, no feasts in her name. Just the continued burning of her sacred flame. Steady, simple, and in its own way, more powerful than any whirlwind romance could ever be. You sit now beside her again, watching the way her fingers tend the embers. The room is quiet, not empty, just full of that kind of silence that feels alive. You think about what it means to choose solitude in a world that rewards spectacle. To say no, gently and firmly, even when gods come calling. And for the first time, you understand why they asked. The flame comes first. That's the rule, etched in stone, recited in temples, whispered in kitchens, before a sacrifice is made to any god. Before a hero rides out or a feast begins, a fire is lit for Hestia. You don't skip it, you don't question it, you just do it, the way you put on socks before shoes or brew coffee before facing your inbox. It's essential, it's sacred, and it's always hers. You sit cross-legged in a small stone courtyard as dawn tiptoes into a sleepy Greek village. The priest stands over a low altar, muttering prayers as he strikes flint. The first sparks catch. A curl of smoke rises. Hestia arrives, not with fanfare or a glowing aura, but in the warmth that settles over the crowd. The hush that falls when everyone suddenly remembers to breathe. This is the sacred hearth fire. And in cities across the Greek world, from Athens to Delphi to tiny coastal towns whose names have been lost to erosion and time, it's the one constant. A public hearth burns in the Prytaneon, the town hall. Essentially, and it burns for her. If the flame goes out, it's not just a bad omen. It's a crisis. You'd sooner forget your own name than let that fire die. When new colonies were founded, and there were a lot of them, colonists would take live embers from the mother city's hearth and transport them across the sea. Picture it. Smoke wafting gently from a clay vessel tucked carefully between grain sacks and amphorae of oil. They're not just carrying warmth. They're carrying legitimacy. A symbolic lifeline back to Hestia's fire and, by extension, to home itself. Historians still debate how those embers stayed lit during weeks-long voyages. Some think the sailors stopped nightly to rekindle it. Others suggest they used slow-burning coals and meticulous care. There's even a theory, unverified, of course, that Hestia herself protected the flame during storms, cupping her divine hands around it like a sacred windbreak. But wherever those embers landed, that's where a new hearth would be built. And once it was lit, that city had a soul. You shift slightly, the stone beneath you warmed by the hearth's glow. Beside you, a family approaches to offer bread and olive oil. No animal sacrifices today. This is a quiet ritual. A thank you. A reminder. The fire crackles in approval. Hestia accepts. It's easy to forget how physical the worship of Hestia is. No towering temples carved into mountains. No dramatic festivals with intoxicated dancers. Just fire. Always fire. And in the flickering of those flames, everything she represents: hospitality, continuity, presence, things that sound small until you lose them. There's a quirky anecdote from an ancient comic playwright, whose name has unfortunately vanished under centuries of dust, who claimed that a clumsy priest once tripped and fell into the city hearth, extinguishing it with his backside. The whole town apparently panicked until a neighboring village sent a fresh ember in a diplomatic olive branch. The priest was forever after nicknamed Charcoal Bottom. Comedy was simpler back then. But the fear? That part was real. A hearth going out wasn't just about losing heat. It was about breaking the thread. Letting go of the one divine presence that never left. In war, in famine, in endless political squabbling, Hestia stayed, so her fire had to. Even in personal homes, it was serious business. The hearth wasn't just a kitchen tool, it was a miniature altar. Families offered the first bite of every meal to Hestia, dropping bits of bread into the flames or pouring a trickle of wine beside them. She didn't need grand gestures. She just wanted to be remembered. You imagine her now, sitting at 1,000 fires across Greece, watching children argue over olives, old men telling half-true war stories, women humming as they knead dough. She's in the background, always in the background, but always there. That presence, that choice to be instead of appear, might explain why she slips under the radar in most myths. No one writes an epic poem about staying home. No bard sings of the goddess who tended soup while her siblings built empires and courted chaos. But maybe that's what makes her so quietly, frustratingly powerful. Even the gods respect it. Zeus, who rarely defers to anyone, makes sure Hestia's name comes first in oaths and libations. Hermes, who can talk his way out of nearly anything, gets notably less chatty around her. And Ares, Ares, once tried to stomp past her fire in a hurry and burned his sandal clean off. Hestia didn't blink. You stare into the fire a little longer. The room around you softens, as if the walls themselves lean in toward the flame. There's no statue of Hestia here. No mural. No hymn playing on loop. Just warmth. Just light. And somehow, that's more than enough. The fire still burns, but the room has changed. You're not in a quiet village anymore. This is Olympus, polished and echoing with divine bickering. Thunderstorms are scheduled for 2 p.m. Hermes is juggling stolen fruit. And Aphrodite has updated her outfit again. The drama here is practically airborne, swirling in the scented winds like Zeus's ever-expanding list of mistakes. And yet, you notice a still point in the center of all that noise. Hestia, right where she always is, seated at the hearth, hair tied back straight, hands folded in her lap. The one deity who never makes the gossip columns. It's not that she's passive. Hestia is not a pushover. She just doesn't participate. You watch as Hera rolls her eyes at one of Zeus's newer love children. As Artemis bristles over a misgendered deer. As Apollo challenges someone, anyone, to a music contest. And Hestia? She's stirring lentils. There's a kind of quiet defiance in her choice to stay out of it all. Not in a holier-than-thou way, just removed. A gentle refusal. She doesn't pick sides, doesn't feud, doesn't play divine chess with mortals' fates. She's Switzerland. If Switzerland wore a chiton and smelled faintly of rosemary. Historians still argue whether this non-involvement was political. Did Hestia strategically stay out of Olympus's wild theatrics to preserve a unique moral standing? Or was she just genuinely uninterested in the chaos? Either way, the result is the same. She remains untarnished. No tragic lovers. No betrayals. No accidental plagues or spontaneous cow transformations. You picture her reading a scroll while Ares stomps around ranting about his latest battlefield performance review. She nods politely, doesn't look up, probably offers him a biscuit. It's not just her family she sidesteps, it's the myths themselves. If the Iliad were a party, Hestia would be the person who RSVPs, maybe, and never shows. She's never kidnapped, cursed, or disguised as livestock. No jealous rampages. No scandalous affairs. She doesn't even show up to most feasts. But the feasts don't start until she's honored. That's the twist. Every ritual begins with Hestia. The first offering is hers. Always. And yet she's almost never in the story. It's like throwing someone a surprise party every day. And they never come downstairs, but you still keep doing it. A quirky footnote in one ancient comedic play suggests that Hestia once tried to intervene in a divine squabble just to ask them to lower their voices. Naturally, she was ignored. She left muttering about having to relight everything now. No one apologized. You sit beside her again. The fire between you, as voices rise and crash around Olympus like divine waves on marble cliffs. You start to ask whether she ever wanted to get involved, to have a grand tale or temple festival of her own. But before you can speak, she reaches into the fire, pulls out a roasted fig, and offers it to you. The fig is warm, soft, a little sweet. You say nothing more. Even during the biggest divine debacles, Pandora opening her jar of doom, Medusa getting snake hair, Athena inventing the olive tree just to beat Poseidon in a city naming contest, Hestia is never blamed. Never entangled. She is, in every sense, the designated adult. You glance toward the edge of Olympus, where Dionysus is stage diving into a pool of wine while Hermes sets up a betting ring. No one seems to notice the hearth glowing steadily in the background. But then again, everything revolves around it. In the center of the most dramatic, loud, morally ambiguous family in myth, there sits Hestia, calm, constant, and very possibly the only sane immortal in the room. And somehow, without ever raising her voice, she keeps Olympus from falling apart. The world smells of onions, baking bread, and a faint trace of old wood smoke. You're not on Olympus anymore, you're in a simple home. A Greek one, stone-walled and olive-scented. Where the hearth is more than a place to cook, it's a quiet shrine. A beacon of stability. A warmth that wraps around you like a wool blanket. Hestia is here, too. Of course, she's always here, sitting beside the fire, sleeves rolled up, peeling garlic or stirring something in a bronze pot that bubbles without urgency. It smells like comfort, not excitement, comfort. There's no ambrosia here, no nectar dripping from golden chalices. Just lentils, maybe a little thyme. You look around the house and realize, it feels safe. Not because it's grand or fortified or full of weaponry, but because the fire is burning and Hestia is tending it. Her presence is so subtle it might as well be air, or gravity, or the feeling of your favorite sweater. You wonder aloud, if you could pray to Hestia, what would you ask for? Riches? Fame? No. You'd probably ask that your sourdough doesn't collapse, that your kid sleeps through the night, that your house stays warm through winter. In short, domestic bliss. Historians note that Hestia's domain, home, hearth, family, is as powerful as any thunderbolt or trident, but far less flashy. Domestic life was the heartbeat of ancient Greece. Cities might rise and fall. Wars might rage outside the walls. But inside, by the hearth, there was order, ritual, soup, and all of it was hers. She was worshipped daily, not yearly. That's rare. Zeus got festivals. Dionysus got parades and regrettable dancing. Hestia? She got routine. Every meal began and ended with offerings to her. She was the first and last guest at every dinner party. And you didn't need to be rich or noble to honor her. A shepherd with a single-room hut could offer a crumb of bread to Hestia, and it counted. She wasn't impressed by status. She wanted sincerity, and maybe a clean floor. There's a quirky, lesser-known myth that claims Hestia once refused to bless a house where the owners had constant shouting matches during dinner. According to legend, the hearth fire kept going out mysteriously, until one of them finally apologized with a burnt offering and a heartfelt note tucked under a fig. Since then, the story goes, couples light a fresh candle together after arguments as a quiet nod to Hestia's peacekeeping style. You picture modern homes now, yours. Maybe, with the stove light glowing faintly in the early morning or the kettle whistling after a long day. Hestia's not gone, she's just adapted. She's the hum of the refrigerator, the pop of the toaster, the soft hiss of gas before the flame flicks blue. In ancient Greek architecture, the hearth was deliberately placed at the physical and spiritual center of the home. Everything revolved around it: meals, prayers, family meetings, even bedtime stories. The hearth wasn't an appliance. It was a personality. One archaeologist once said that excavating an ancient Greek home was like finding a small temple with casseroles. That's how deeply embedded Hestia was in the daily rhythm of life. And she never demanded more than that. She didn't ask for sculptures or wars in her name. She didn't need sacrifices of bulls or golden apples. She just wanted to be invited to dinner. You glance at her again. Still seated. Still peeling something that may or may not be artichoke. She's humming now. A soft, unplaceable tune that feels older than the walls. And it strikes you. This is divine power. 2. Not domination. Not miracles. Just showing up. Every single day. You settle into a cushion near the fire, watching as shadows flicker on the walls. The room is quiet in the best possible way. Not empty, full of warmth and scent, and the soft clink of clay against stone. A house alive. You don't need to say anything. Hestia doesn't, either. You're home. You wake slowly to the sound of sandals on stone, soft, deliberate, rhythmic. A torch flickers in the hallway, casting long shadows that stretch like cattails across the polished floor. It's night in the temple now. And the hearth is not alone. Here come the priestesses. You sit up and see them moving in pairs. Heads bowed, robes cinched tight, the fabric whispering with every step. These are Hestia's attendants, her chosen keepers. And perhaps the most underappreciated night shift in ancient Greece. Their job is both beautifully simple and completely exhausting. Keep the fire burning. Always. Every temple had its rituals, its chants and garlands and midnight mysteries. But none required quite so much endurance as Hestia's. Because her flame? It doesn't take weekends. It doesn't nap. And if it goes out, well, let's just say the omens aren't great. Cities have panicked for less. Historians still argue whether Hestia's attendants were technically part of the larger class of temple virgins. Like the Roman Vestals, while not identical, the overlap is striking. Strict vows. No romantic entanglements. Years of temple service. And deeply uncomfortable wooden sandals. Some of these women were chosen young and trained for months on how to light, tend, and read the flame as if it were a living oracle. Which, to them, it was. You watch as one priestess, no older than 20, crouches to feed the fire a bundle of dried olive twigs. Her movements are precise, reverent. She doesn't smile, but she hums softly. The same nameless lullaby you heard from Hestia herself. A fringe theory among temple scholars suggests this melody was passed from goddess to mortal in dreams. No one knows the lyrics. There probably never were any. In one corner, another priestess gently nudges a dozing colleague awake with her elbow. You pretend not to notice. Standing night watch over a fire may be sacred, but it's also deeply boring. And human. There's an old temple anecdote that once, during a particularly sleepy shift, the fire almost went out. The lead priestess, thinking quickly, lit her own hair on fire and plunged her head into the hearth to relight it. The tale ends with her being miraculously unharmed, though slightly singed, and forever called Ashbane. Whether this story is true or just sacred workplace humor, no one really knows. Still, it captures something real. How far these women would go for their goddess. Unlike the flashy roles in temples of Zeus or Athena, where oracles and sacrifices made headlines, Hestia's priestesses worked in quiet devotion. There were no prophecies to deliver, no epic dramas to manage, just embers to stoke, logs to stack, rituals to repeat, and repeat, and repeat. And yet, their influence ran deeper than any pyre. In a world where war was common and home was never guaranteed, the hearth stood as a kind of divine anchor. As long as it burned, there was stability. That meant the priestesses weren't just fire watchers. They were guardians of social order. In some cities, they even mediated disputes, inviting quarreling neighbors to sit by the hearth until things cooled down. One priestess reportedly ended a 10-year family feud with nothing but mulled wine, stern eye contact, and a well-timed log toss. You stretch your legs now, feeling the stone's chill slowly fading beneath the fire's warmth. One of the priestesses offers you a mug, herbal tea. You think, with steam curling like tiny ghosts. You sip and feel your shoulders relax. It's easy to romanticize their life. Cloisters and candles, silence and ceremony. But it was also a job. A long, tireless, mostly thankless job. They had bad days, burned fingers, cold floors. It wasn't glamour. It was discipline. Still, you can't help but admire them. These women, most of them never named in history books, were the arms and legs of a goddess who never left her seat. They didn't wield spears or summon storms, but they maintained. And in ancient Greece, that was revolutionary. You look at the fire again. It's steady now, with the dark just far enough away to keep you grateful. The priestesses return to their silent watch. The room breathes. And somewhere, Hestia smiles. You hear the clatter of distant swords and the rising shout of war cries, not here, but out there, just beyond the safety of the hearth. It's always out there, somewhere in Greece, or perhaps Troy, or maybe just down the street in a tavern where Ares is throwing another divine temper tantrum. War is a favorite pastime of gods. Peace? Not so much. But Hestia stays. Inside the city walls, where the flame still flickers and pots simmer on low heat. The goddess of the hearth holds her ground, not with weapons, but with warmth. And that's what makes her so quietly powerful, while Ares screams into the battlefield void. Hestia speaks through soup. Even when cities braced for attack, the last ritual before retreat was often not battle preparation but honoring Hestia. Offerings were made, fires were refreshed, because if war breaks everything, then Hestia is the one who reminds you what unbroken feels like. Historians note that Hestia had no temples of her own in most city-states. Instead, her temple was every public hearth, especially the one in the Prytaneum, the town hall where council members met. This was no coincidence. Politics and fire sat in the same room. The logic was clear. Decisions should only be made in a space where Hestia listens. Contrast that with Ares, who often had temples far from the city center, places where rage could echo without knocking over the soup. Even in mythology, when the gods feuded, Hestia was never at the center of the fight. She was the reason there could be a center at all. There's a quirky fragment from a dramatist no one reads anymore. A lost comedy where Ares storms into a city council meeting. Furious about being left out of a festival, he demands tribute, threatens thunder. Hestia, seated calmly at the hearth, simply offers him bread. The scene ends with Ares awkwardly chewing and mumbling something about carbs. You imagine now a Greek household, walls trembling from distant conflict, and a woman kneeling at the hearth to whisper a prayer. Not to win the war, not to smite enemies, just for her child to wake up safe the next day, just for the fire to hold. Hestia listens. Her worship didn't rely on spectacle. She wasn't summoned in desperation, then forgotten after the miracle. She was constant, invoked before meals, during births, at the founding of cities. And yes, even before battle, she was the first flame lit in peacetime and the last to extinguish in retreat. The poet Callimachus once wrote that, even Ares feared a house without Hestia. A clever line, yes, but also painfully true, because what is victory without a home to return to? You shift slightly, hearing the creak of a door opening behind you. A young man steps inside, dirt-streaked, wearing the remnants of armor. He drops his spear gently by the door. He doesn't say much, just walks over to the hearth and sits beside it, exhaling everything he's carried. Hestia doesn't scold, she doesn't praise, she just nudges a bowl of stew in his direction. It's still warm. He eats in silence, and in that silence, he heals. There's a modern theory among archaeologists that the reverence for Hestia extended into architecture, that homes were literally built around the hearth as a sacred design principle. It wasn't the fireplace that filled an empty room. The fire came first, then the walls, then the roof, as if everything else was just a container for the goddess. That idea, of the hearth as foundation, still echoes in our lives today. We talk about hearth and home. We refer to the kitchen as the heart of the house. Even gas stoves and electric ovens carry something of Hestia's legacy, humming softly as we boil, roast, and stir. Meanwhile, outside, the gods still fight. Ares still rages. Poseidon still floods things he doesn't understand. But here, beside the flame, there's no war, only the promise that, when the shouting dies down, there will be warmth, and dinner, and someone quietly making sure the bread doesn't burn. And that's victory. The museum is quiet, save for the occasional squeaky sneaker or bored school group passing through the marble halls. You wander past rows of gods frozen in mid-flex, Zeus casting lightning, Athena brandishing a spear, Aphrodite looking effortlessly flawless even in stone. But there's someone missing. Where's Hestia? You check the plaques. Nothing. A dusty corner holds a modest relief of a seated woman holding a flame. But there's no grand statue. No towering likeness carved from alabaster. It's strange, isn't it? One of the oldest and most honored deities in the Greek pantheon. And she's barely represented in stone. Historians still debate why. Some argue that Hestia's worship was too personal, too everyday, to warrant public art. Others believe that sculptors simply didn't know how to capture her. What do you carve when your subject is stillness itself? There's an odd paradox at the heart of Hestia's mythology. She was revered by everyone but almost never depicted. Her presence was universal, her iconography minimal. She didn't ride chariots across the sky or slay beasts. She didn't shapeshift or seduce. She just was, and perhaps in the eyes of artists, being wasn't dramatic enough to chisel. You imagine the scene. A young sculptor in ancient Athens, commissioned to portray Hestia for the temple vestibule. He sketches flames, then a serene woman, then just the hearth. Then he shrugs and sculpts Athena again. Easier to make someone in a helmet look cool. Meanwhile, the average citizen saw Hestia every day, just not in marble. She was in the fire, in the rhythm of cooking, in the quiet moment after a long walk when you sit near the warmth and just breathe. There's a quirky inscription from a rural village altar that reads simply, "To Hestia. Who keeps my soup hot." It's not poetic, it's not epic, but it might be the most honest form of praise she ever received. In public ceremonies, she wasn't cheered, she was bowed to, the first and last name on every prayer list. But still, no temple parades, no carved friezes of her smiting injustice. Instead, she got a fire, and that was enough. You pause by a clay pot, labeled as a domestic offering bowl, used for wine or honey or barley, small tokens left near the hearth. It's chipped and uneven, not the sort of thing you'd notice. And yet, this was Hestia's altar, not a marble column but a kitchen floor. There's a fringe theory among some academics that Hestia's invisibility was intentional, that her power came from her refusal to be visually captured. By never anchoring her image in one form, she could be everywhere. Every fire, every room, every quiet moment became hers. No statue required. Even in mythological art, where chaos reigns and gods duel in swirling frescoes, Hestia is often an off-panel presence. A warm glow in the corner. A hand offering bread. Sometimes, just a firepot tucked near the bottom of the frame. You have to look for her. She never demands it. And yet she's always there. You think of modern parallels now. That quiet friend who never posts but always shows up when it matters. The aunt who doesn't join the family drama group chat but somehow still knows exactly when to call. The teacher who never raises their voice but somehow runs the room with a glance. Hestia is their patron saint. You sit now in front of what may or may not be her only surviving likeness, a simple carving of a seated woman. No dramatic pose, no glowing aura, just stillness. Her hand rests over a small flame. Her eyes are downcast, serene. She's not looking at you. She's not trying to impress. She's just tending the fire. And as you look at her, you realize that the most worshipped deity in all of ancient Greece didn't need 1,000 statues. She had the hearth. She had memory. She had presence. She still does. The streets are dusty, the sandals worn, and the sun unrelenting. But you're not in Greece anymore. The skyline has shifted. The language sounds different, and the togas are looking a little more Roman than usual. You've arrived in the city of Rome, where Hestia has taken on a new name and a bigger job. They call her Vesta here. You pass the bustling forum, where merchants shout, orators gesticulate wildly, and someone in the background is probably getting mugged by pickpockets in very convincing tunics. Amid the chaos stands a quiet, circular temple with white columns and a gently curved roof. You can feel it before you see it, that warmth again. It's the Temple of Vesta, home of the Vestal Virgins, and it's perhaps the most literal case of a goddess burning her way into another culture's architecture. The fire here, like in Greece, never goes out. It must not go out. Historians love to debate whether the Roman cult of Vesta is a direct continuation of Hestia's worship or a parallel invention. But let's be real, it's the same girl. New city, new uniform, still not moving from the hearth. And the Romans? They took her seriously. The Vestal Virgins were no ordinary attendants. They were chosen as children, usually between the ages of 6 and 10, and served for 30 years. 30. That's most of your life spent lighting fires, praying, and making sure no one so much as sneezes near the sacred flame. These women had enormous prestige. They could own property, free prisoners, and even influence political decisions. But the catch? No boyfriends. Ever. Breaking the vow of chastity was punishable by a very specific fate: being buried alive in a chamber with just enough food to make it technically not murder. So yeah, not just a light internship. Still, these women weren't just human fire alarms. They were symbols of purity, of Rome's unbroken spirit, of the state itself. As long as Vesta's fire burned, Rome was considered protected by the gods. You walk through the temple's inner sanctum now, stepping lightly across smooth marble. The air smells faintly of ash and something sweet, maybe honey cakes. Maybe the perfume of a nearby altar. The fire sits in the center, low and golden, flickering quietly as if it knows it's been burning for centuries and doesn't want to show off. There's a lesser-known story, mostly found in scraps of Roman gossip scrolls, about a time the fire almost went out. A careless novice dozed off mid-watch, and the flame died. The penalty was harsh: flogging, public shame, mandatory extra prayers. But the real punishment? The weight of breaking a promise that had lasted generations. That kind of guilt could live in your bones. You glance up and see a procession forming just outside, citizens bringing offerings, garlands, and oddly shaped baked goods. It's the Vestalia, Vesta's annual festival, where even the normally locked temple doors are open to public view. The people arrive not with dramatic sacrifices, but with gratitude, for warm homes, for safe kitchens, for quiet. There's a quirky Roman custom you overhear from a local priest. During Vestalia, women walked barefoot through the city as a sign of humility and respect. One priest even slipped on an olive pit and declared it a divine omen of fertility. Historians remain unconvinced. You step out into the light again and look back at the temple. No towering statue, no loud music, no animal sacrifices, just a quiet flame, watched over by women whose lives were built around not letting it die. That's Vesta. That's Hestia. Still refusing a throne, still staying home, still holding the line. And here's the secret: by never leaving the hearth. She never leaves anywhere. The city is long gone now. The temple crumbled. The priestesses buried or forgotten. Rome fell, rose, and fell again. And yet, the flame is still burning. Not visibly, not literally, but it's there, in every home, in every quiet kitchen, in every place where someone lights a fire, boils water, or just leans against a warm stove and sighs after a long day. That's the strange magic of Hestia. She never left. She never had to. You step into a modest house. Modern now. There's linoleum on the floor, a kettle on the range, maybe a cat sitting on the counter like it pays rent. You wouldn't think it sacred. But in the soft hum of the fridge, in the gentle rattle of the teacup, in the memory of shared meals, she's there. No invocation needed. You realize that Hestia's greatest trick is that she's always present and yet never seen. No myths feature her rescuing warriors or throwing lightning. But she's in all the myths. Right there, off frame, providing the fire that cooks the food, the warmth the hero returns to, the lamp left on. There's an old Greek saying, a home without Hestia is not a home. Simple. Too simple. Maybe. But when you think about it, what makes a house more than just walls and a roof? It's not Wi-Fi. It's not even furniture. It's that sense of rootedness. That feeling that you can breathe here. Historians still discuss whether Hestia counts as a major deity in the later periods of Greek religion. Technically, she was replaced on Olympus by Dionysus in some traditions. But ask any ancient Greek farmer lighting a fire at dawn which god mattered more that day. And the answer would not involve wine or theater. It would be Hestia. Every time. Even in cultures far removed from Greece. There's a fire goddess, a home spirit, a presence at the hearth. The names differ: Brigid in Ireland, Gabija in Lithuania, even the Japanese Kamido Kami watching over the stove. Maybe it's coincidence. Or maybe Hestia is just multilingual. There's a quirky story, mostly oral tradition, of an old Greek grandmother who refused to get an electric oven because Hestia doesn't do buttons. When her daughter brought her a new stove, she placed a clay bowl with olive oil beside it and whispered a prayer anyway. The food came out perfect. Told you, she said. You think now about all the moments in life where someone just was there. A parent, a partner, a friend who didn't try to fix things. Didn't need applause. Just stayed. Maybe brought you tea. Sat beside you. Said nothing. That's Hestia. She doesn't appear in triumph. She appears in presence. She's not the event. She's the space that allows it. Even in public buildings, courthouses, senates, libraries, you can trace the bones of her worship. Architecture that centers around communal space. Circular structures. Fireplaces no one quite wants to remove even in buildings with central heating. The symbolism persists, not through belief, but through design. You walk now through your own memories. Childhood dinners. A grandmother humming in the kitchen. The first time you cooked something just for yourself. The way you always leave one lamp on at night, not for light, but for comfort. Hestia is not just in myths. She's in ritual. And that's her gift. No thrones, no temples. Just the idea that if you keep the fire lit, whatever form it takes, she'll be there. Always. It's late now, and the world is quiet. Not the ominous kind of quiet. Like something is about to leap out from the shadows. No, this is the Hestia kind of quiet, the sound of a room just after you've cleaned it. Or the hush that falls when everyone's finally fallen asleep. The only thing moving is the light from the fire, flickering softly across the floor like it's breathing. And somehow, Hestia is still here. You wonder, how can someone be everywhere and nowhere all at once? Never in the spotlight, never in the credits, and yet utterly essential? That's the mystery of the goddess who never left her post. She wasn't absent, she was present in a way no one else dared to be. This is the part of the myth where you expect a farewell. A swan song, a final bow, but Hestia never left, so she doesn't need to return. She didn't ride off into the sunset or vanish in a puff of divine smoke. She simply stayed, through centuries, through empires, through gas stoves and slow cookers and smart kitchen appliances. There's a less-known mythic fragment, a sentence scrawled in the margins of a crumbling manuscript, that claims Hestia once offered a final gift to the world. The ability to find stillness wherever there is warmth. Whether that's a campfire or a bedside lamp or the sunbeam that hits your pillow just right. The myth says, that is where she waits. You pause and think. Maybe that's what you felt all along. Not a god in robes and gold, but something subtler. The way the light falls across your hands while you're chopping vegetables. The warmth of a mug resting against your chest. The feeling of coming home after a hard day. Kicking off your shoes, and realizing there's nowhere else you need to be. Historians still debate whether Hestia had any actual followers by the end of the classical period. The big cults shifted, power moved, priests wore different robes, but fires still got lit. Bread was still broken and shared. And that quiet moment before a meal, just before the first bite, still held a space that felt sacred. You sit now in a room that could be anywhere. Modern or ancient, rural or urban, there's a fire in the center. Or maybe just the glow of a screen. Or a candle. Or a warm light behind a curtain. And in that glow, you hear her again, not in words, but in rhythm. The clink of dishes, the creak of wood, the breath you didn't realize you were holding until now. There's a fringe theory, not academically accepted, but emotionally compelling, that says Hestia didn't fade with the fall of paganism. She just blended in, became the unspeaking presence in every moment of peace. Every time a parent reads a bedtime story. Every time friends laugh in a kitchen. Every time someone lights a candle not for ceremony, but for company. It would be just like her to go unnoticed that way. She's been doing it forever. And maybe, just maybe, you've already carried her flame with you. Not in your hands, but in your routines. The way you always tidy the living room before guests arrive. The way you hum to yourself while cooking. The way you linger for just a moment at the door, soaking in the warmth before stepping out into the noise again. So the flame doesn't die. Not because of temples or rituals, but because you kept it going. Hestia didn't need to be remembered. She just needed you to stay warm. You're sitting now in your own kitchen. Or maybe it's someone else's. The details don't matter much, only the warmth does. The clock ticks softly. A spoon clinks in a cup. And something on the stove is simmering gently. You lean back and look around. This is a temple. Not in the traditional sense. There are no marble columns. No incense offerings. No gilded altars. But Hestia is here all the same, hovering quietly between the refrigerator and the stovetop. peeking out from behind the cabinet where you keep the tea bags. You don't need a torch to honor her. These days, a working smoke alarm is enough. The modern world doesn't feel very mythic most of the time. It's fast, loud, cluttered. There's email instead of scrolls, roommates instead of demigods, and your closest encounter with divine intervention is your microwave mysteriously restarting itself. But somehow, Hestia has kept up. She's the goddess of the background, and this world? It's nothing but background noise. And yet, despite the blaring headlines and algorithmic chaos, she finds a way to settle in. In the pause before your coffee brews. In the candle you light without thinking. In the electric hum of a kitchen at midnight when you wander in half awake for a glass of water. There's a quirky little anecdote from a modern folklorist who once interviewed elderly villagers in northern Greece. She asked them if they still believed in the old gods. They all laughed, of course not. But then one old woman added, "Except Hestia. You never stop believing in your own stove." Historians still wonder why certain deities adapt while others fade. Dionysus gets music festivals. Hermes turns up in fashion logos. But Hestia? She's not flashy. She didn't rebrand. She just quietly continued. Because as long as humans gather and share warmth, she's got job security. You open a drawer and find your old oven mitt, slightly scorched at the edges. That, too, is an artifact. It's your household aegis, your offering plate, your temple tapestry. Hestia doesn't need it to be beautiful. She just needs it to work. And isn't that her whole message? Beauty fades, strength weakens, but warmth? That endures. Your modern rituals may not involve oaths over flames or recited hymns in Doric verse. But they still carry the same shape. Every time you text someone to drive safe. Every time you fluff a pillow for a guest. Every time you make a second portion because someone might be hungry later. That's Hestia. You realize now why she never needed a throne. A throne implies hierarchy, authority, distance. But Hestia doesn't rule from above. She sits beside you. She waits in kitchens and shelters and hospice rooms and refugee tents. She doesn't lecture. She listens. And occasionally, she tops off your tea. There's a theory, held by no one but it still deserves to be true, that Hestia never wanted temples because the world itself was her temple. Every home, every corner where a human sought peace, or warmth, or just 5 minutes of not being yelled at, that was hers. You remember now a childhood home, maybe real, maybe pieced together from memories and borrowed stories. A wood stove, a chipped mug, the smell of cinnamon. No one told you this was sacred. But it was. It still is. Even now, Hestia waits in the soft glow of your kitchen light. She doesn't ask for devotion. Just awareness. Just presence. Just one more log on the fire. Even if it's metaphorical. Even if it's just a warm blanket folded at the end of the couch. You take a deep breath. And you feel it. The sacred, ordinary magic of being home. You're walking now, not in a myth. Not in a temple, but through the corridors of your own routines. The morning coffee. The grocery list. The text me when you get home. It's all so small, so forgettable. And yet, if Hestia ever had a favorite hymn, this would be it. The quiet rhythm of daily life. This, after all, is what she chose. When other gods sought dominion over oceans and skies, storms and underworlds, Hestia chose something far more elusive, constancy. She could have taken a throne, could have had sculptures, epics, even a constellation or two. But she said no, and somehow, that no echoes louder than any war cry. You picture her now, sitting by a gas burner in a fifth-floor apartment, or standing near a glowing kettle in a cabin up north. Or waiting patiently in the humming silence of a dark kitchen after everyone's gone to bed. She's not gone. She's just everywhere you never thought to look. There's something radically comforting in the idea of a deity who doesn't test you. Hestia doesn't need you to prove your worth. Doesn't demand your firstborn goat or interpretive dance. She just wants you to tend the flame, whatever that looks like. Historians still can't decide whether Hestia's worship was active by the end of Greek antiquity or whether it had become purely symbolic. But the truth is, that distinction might not matter. She was never a goddess of spectacle. She was a goddess of continuity. And continuity doesn't vanish, it settles. It makes itself at home and stays there. You think back through all the stories, Apollo and Poseidon rejected. The hearth lit first in every offering. The city embers carried across oceans. The priestesses with soot-stained fingers standing guard through the night. And all of it circles back to this one truth. She never left the hearth because she was the hearth. There's a strange serenity in the idea that you don't need to go anywhere, do anything, or accomplish greatness to be divine. Sometimes, just showing up, again and again, in kindness, in warmth, in unwavering care, is enough. That's the essence of Hestia. And it's likely why she'd like you. Not the loudest, not the most famous, maybe not even the most interesting, but the one who remembers to water the plants. The one who reheats leftovers for someone coming home late. The one who stays behind to make sure the door is locked and the lights are out. You don't need a crown for that. There's a quirky little saying passed around among ancient Greek households. Hestia keeps no ledger. But she always notices. It's not about rewards. It's about being seen, quietly, by a goddess who values the unremarkable in all the best ways. You sit back now, wherever you are. Maybe the room is lit only by your screen. Or maybe there's an actual flame nearby, dancing gently in a glass candle. Either way, you feel the warmth. You've carried her flame this far. Let it glow a little longer. And now, the fire softens, the light dims, the shadows grow longer and slower, stretching lazily across the quiet room. The air is warm, still, with only the faintest hiss of the flame, the hush of breath, the hush of sleep. Hestia is still there. She always is. The clamor of gods and monsters, of temples and myths, has faded now, like distant thunder retreating across a mountain. What's left is gentle, familiar, the curl of steam from a teacup, the heavy sigh of someone who's finally put their feet up, the comfort of knowing that nothing more is expected of you tonight. Just rest. Let the images blur now, the hearth flickering, the clay bowls stacked neatly, the quiet hands tending embers without a word. Let your thoughts slow like coals settling deep into ash, red hot and silent. You are safe. You are still. And Hestia watches, not as a queen or judge or towering deity, but as a presence. A breath of warmth at your back, a whisper behind your eyelids. Let the room drift around you. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the soft glow guide you gently towards sleep. She'll keep the fire lit. You don't have to. Good night.